Countdown. Wide out. Power. Wide out. Power. Shuffle. Pull and pull, pull and pull, pull and pull. A. A. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Power Hour show, brought to you courtesy of Perfect Balance Clinic. It is open. Yes, it is business as usual. You just need to go to the clinic website to know how best your goals, your health goals can be met, even under this lockdown, second lockdown situation. The clinic is open. All practitioners are ready and available to assist you. Back to the Power Hour tonight, because it's business as usual. We go on with bringing you guests, to continue getting some insights from individual stories, individual athletes, individual coaches' stories. And tonight, thank you very much, Malcolm, for making the time. I have a colleague here and, a respected colleague within the athletics disability community, because he is up there doing the top job, with some of Great Britain's teams and Great Britain's athletes with a disability. Welcome, Malcolm. Welcome to the show, Matt. How has been your day?
Oh, it's not too bad. Just plenty of work on at the moment. That's trying to get out and retire if I can.
What a great show. Yes, Malcolm, always a laugh, always a laugh. Now, tell me, we have met in different, trainings environments, and I've known the work that you do with athletes with a disability. And yet also, I know sometimes these are described as disabled athletes. That's where I like to start from, Malcolm. What is your take on there? What resonates with you and with your experience working with these athletes? Are they disabled athletes? Are they athletes with a disability? What's your take on it?
Well, first and foremost, they're athletes. So they're athletes with a disability. However, what I would say is that with an athlete and with someone with a disability, as long as you are honest and you mean what you're saying, they will accept everything. I'll give you an example. I was doing playground to podium, and I couldn't find the word I was looking for, so I said normal athletes. And as soon as I said it, I knew I was wrong, but an athlete with a disability said, don't worry, we have the same problem. It's sometimes finding that right word, but as long as you're honest and sincere. The flip side of that, 2 days later, I got an email from a UKA welfare person, and she sent me two pages of words I'm not allowed to say. Top of the list was normal. But it's actually the athletes themselves. They are quite happy as long as you're being honest with them. I prefer athletes with a disability because I think it describes them and it's much more professional.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Now that, yeah, to arrive at such a position, you obviously must have, because that's a very experiential position. To look and reflect on descriptors that are coming through the systems or coming through the cultures. But how
Yes.
did Malcolm, decide to get involved with, disability sport or a sport for athletes with a disability? How did it happen?
Um, I had a parent come to me one day and said to me, um, "Would you be willing to coach my son?" And I said, "I coach anybody. I don't mind who they are. Um, let's have a chat." And funnily enough, I'd just finished running the Venice Marathon. I'd got cellulitis and I was in a wheelchair. And along came Michael Pope, who happens to be an F40 dwarf. And we looked a right pair. And he said to me sometime later, I wondered what I was getting involved in when I saw my coach couldn't walk. I said, well, I could walk, but unfortunately, I had cellulitis. And that's how it all started from. And then Mike did very well, and he was, he's a good athlete. He trained hard, and we got one or two. He obtained a couple of good records. He went over to America and won some the world championships with Wolves. And then someone else came to me and said, "Would you look after mine?" And then gradually, um, I got more and more people coming to me, and and because a lot of clubs don't like having disability within their clubs, and coaches say, "Well, I can't coach you," they tend to come to me, or the parents come to me, and I suddenly built up a squad of able-bodied, mainstream athletes and athletes with a disability. So I know that at one time, just before London 2012, there was a Channel 4 program done, and it had Michael, um, about three different disabilities. We had a hearing disability, learning disability, and about three or four CP athletes and one amputee, plus all the able athletes that I'd coached at the same time. And we always worked together as a team because they're all friends. And they used to come out to the cinema together and they became very close. They still are, many of them still close with them. So it just seemed to rise out of that. I had a young girl came to me once, her mother originally, and said she went to a club and the coach said she could coach her because she couldn't do the drill. Um, well, no, she can't do the drills because she's got a disability, which stopped her from doing drills, but she could run. And when you've got someone come to you and says, I want to join in athletics and I want to find out the fun and the things that she can achieve, then you don't turn them away. You find them actually helping them,
Mm,
which is what I
mm,
do.
yeah. Now, for most people, yeah, if an athlete has got a disability, it's an athlete. The disability must be visible, and yet I hear you there to refer to athletes with a learning disability. Now, that's not something that you can readily see, except if
Yeah,
you had an opportunity to be with them and understand their learning difficulties and expressing those difficulties. So it's a
yeah,
very
it's
broad area, when it comes to defining the codes and for disability. And I'm sure I had two coaches on the program who said, it's difficult for people to agree even within the disability sport community.
oh,
Where does this code end? Where does that code end? What's your take on all this? The
I
processes or
think
the
part of the
to determine what disability an athlete has got.
I despair at times, first of all, because you will find when you're working with able athletes with disability that parents and other coaches will start moaning about your athlete who's been classified as an ex-athlete. So it would say, right, your classification, I don't know, you could say 36, F36, which is a cerebral palsy one. But the code is not, the classification is not cerebral palsy, it's a brain problem. And it's also linked into nerves, etc., how the nervous system works. So I've had situations where one young guy, every time he competed, the father used to go and complain that he was throwing out of classification. The one thing I do say is it is nothing to do with the athlete. If you remember, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, we had the House of Commons inquiry into classification and disability sport. I was asked to put in some submissions to them, and someone else named athletes that was wrongly classified. I am not. I can classify. I can look at an athlete and get a good idea, but I don't have their medical records. I don't understand always what's wrong with them. So I have to accept what classification they're given. I can protest, but I never involve the athlete themselves. I can tell you of an instance where a young man had a stroke. He ended up in a wheelchair and he became a seated thrower. And he won a world record, a world championships, got a world record. And when he got reclassified because his illness increased, his disability increased. When he got his new classification, a number of people said to his face, and I was there when it happened, you are putting a load of people out of the sport. And that's wrong. We have to work with the classifiers. And if we have a problem, and I speak to a lot of them internationally, and they come to me. I've had classifiers come to me. In Dubai, I had a classifier come to me about an athlete and said, what did I think? Because it is subjective. There are problems within classification, and I think we all agree that. For instance, I remember a seated thrower couldn't use his legs, and he was tapping away to music as if he was Michael Jackson. So we have to go and talk to the officials and say, we have a concern with that athlete, because we don't think it. I've seen athletes, and it's all in the world. It's not only just European or English or Middle Eastern, whatever it is. They are given a classification, and it's up to the classifiers to get it right. I'm at the moment have an issue where we're trying to get people with the pain problem, regional pain syndrome, because of the research done. We now believe they should be classified. So yes, there is problems, but as long as you talk to people and you go to the people who actually do the classifying at an international level and talk to them about your worries and concerns, and they will come back to you. Like I say, in Dubai, I had 2 people come to me about 2 particular athletes, and they asked my advice, and they said, what do I think? And I said, well, he's in the right classification, he isn't. And I give you some idea how difficult it can be. I had a young man, had cerebral palsy. Nobody knows what the medical terminology or what medical illnesses he's got. We know he's got cerebral palsy, but there's a lot of different things that can happen in the background to actually take down his disability to an even lower level. He was originally classified at 36. I worked with him for a year. We then went for international classification, and he went up to F38. And that is because we'd worked and we'd got him to actually present himself in competition as closer to the mainstream athlete, what he's capable of doing, than a badly disabled F36. So I accepted that. I just said, yeah, I understand that, because at the bottom line is how they present themselves in competition. How do they look? Do they look as an F-36 or F-38? Do they look as a sprinter who's a track athlete? But then you look at them, and I always say to people, the only ones I can really say are definite are the ones with the amputees, because that's very clear to say. Because you never know what other illness they've got within their own body. So it's a case of working with the classifiers, accepting it, and parents and coaches should not get involved and making complaints about other athletes. Go and talk to the people, talk to the parents and say, I've got a concern. Can you explain a bit more about your son or your daughter? And quite willing to. So, yeah, and there are, you can, when you go into international competition, you can see where someone's been misclassified. And that's not a fault of the athlete. Mike, who I coached, he can't walk. He's got no use of his legs because he aorta went. And I was asked by, and we were both asked by an international classifier, what is an aorta? And we went, 1 minute, this is wrong. So we sort of said, hang on, we need someone who understands his disability. And we took over to Dubai and his international classification 12 envelopes of medical notes. And they were never looked at. But actually, we got the classification we expected, which was 56. And we were happy. So it's a case of talking to people and coaches have got to learn it's their responsibility to classify. But we're still allowed to moan at them, though. We're still allowed to moan at other coaches. It's our nature.
Malcolm, yeah, you have just, put it out there, the challenges with classification within disability sport, sport for athletes with a disability, because the nature of the disability is the nature of the disabilities are very broad and different one athlete to the other, and I'm sure it's a difficult thing for the authorities that come up with the classifications to come up distinctively with it. This is what it is, because those boundaries keep shifting.
Yes, I think the important thing is that we are given a lot of confidential information, right, by parents, and I have to respect that confidentiality. I can tell you why certain athletes been classified in that way, but I won't do because it's personal information. I have medical notes. I talk to the athletes' doctors, their surgeons, and it's just confidentiality. Other coaches will talk to other coaches about what's wrong with their athletes. It's something I won't do. They're human beings, and we need to respect them.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that one, Malcolm. I'm going to give you a break here, so water break. But when we come back, I'd just like to understand, let's move away from the, the complexities of the classification. You look at the various codes that are there within track and field, which is the sport you are involved in, and how you yourself manage. You seem to be you seem to go right across the codes. And what is the attitude with with athletes regarding that? I understand there's a lot of changing of codes. Now with your explanation there, I can see why it happens, because the disabilities get reclassified, and therefore athletes have to make other decisions regarding that. When we come back, Malcolm, that's what we'll be talking about. Right. In the meantime.
Right.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, I have Malcolm Wallace here talking to us about disability sport, or and athletes with a disability, and the challenges with that and the opportunities with that. Now, it's an it's easy for people when they're starting coaching, to just jump into coaching. Usually it's because your child is involved in a particular sport and you end up getting into coaching. But that is not necessarily the case with disability sport. And coaches, there is a tendency for coaches not to readily, choose disability sport as something that they want to get involved in there. What's your experience with that, and what's your advice, for both parents and aspiring coaches in getting involved with disability sport?
I actually spend a bit of my time now going around the country, and I work with a lot of athletes and coaches down in the West Country, for instance, where I will work with the coach and the athletes and help them, because you can do a training course and you can have some idea and follow a program written down, but every athlete within the disability sector is different. There's not one the same. I've seen people talk about biomechanics for throwers and sprinters, etc. But everyone is different. And it's a case of talking to the athlete, learning from them, experimenting with different ways of doing things. And really, and I even go to doctors, their doctor, and say, what am I allowed to do? I know with the dwarfs, you've got achondroplasia and some other different ones, short stature, but they've all got problems in different areas. That actually neck, the back, the ankles, knees, hips. I've got an athlete at the moment, a dwarf. She has problems with her hips. So I have to sit down with her and actually work out how we're going to strengthen the muscles and work out how we can get her to do better. So, but then, for instance, I'll be doing, say, that young lady, that then I'll go to a military man who only had one arm, his right arm. No, he had left arm. Sorry, his left arm. I'm trying to work it out now. He had his left arm, and I'm going to work with him to find out how I can get him to throw, because he couldn't run for various other reasons. But he wanted to do seated throwing, so he worked on it, and we got to increase. Talking to him, he had to explain to me what movements he could do because of his limitations. And then the other one, Mike, for instance, who had problems with his leg, we had to work with him. And then Marie was something totally different. Although they're seated throwers, they're all different. With Dave, who was only had the one arm from Afghanistan, he couldn't hold a bar. He's only got one arm, right? So you have to look at ways of getting him stable, his balance, and work on balance and stuff like that area. And he went on and he won medals at the military games. So yeah, it's about looking at and talking to. It's much more intense working with an athlete with a disability than necessarily a mainstream athlete, because you've got to find it. I remember one mother, Jonathan Adams' mother, said to me the day I actually went and met them, she said, I'm going to say one thing to you. If you injure my son, you're dead. So it concentrates your mind a lot. So you have to go and talk. Yes, Dan, and she could have done. But you have to go and talk to the parent. You have to talk to the father, the mother, and see their doctor, and then talk to the athlete and ask him questions. I remember Jonathan could never run, right? And we had some funny situations with him as well, but he couldn't run. So one of the things I did, we said we're going to teach him how to run. He could run, but because of a problem he'd had that had been rectified, he'd never had, I don't know whether it's confidence, or we'd never had the ability to run. And we got him to run one day at Bury St Edmunds. And his mum was walking, and I said, "Now show your mum what you can do." And it was like, that was the most important thing for his mother. His mother can see that her son is now able to run. So it's about talking to animals, listening to them. And everyone is, I had Michael Pope and Jack Gamble, both dwarfs, both in the same classification, and both totally different because of different problems. Right? So you have to sit with them individually. But I do experiment with them in as much as, say, with a dwarf, I'd get them standing in different positions. Young Charlie, who I've coached, we had to move him around the circle so he could actually get in the right position. One of the things that I always look at with a thrower is that final position in the throw, which is at the front. How do we get them from the back to the front? Or if they're in a seated chair, what's the best way for them to sit to actually replicate, enable a mainstream athlete throwing technique? And that's what you look at. You look at making sure that when they come round in the right way. They've got the right posture. And it's a whole host of things. So everyone is different, and you have to work with each one.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing, working with, talking to people. And you get close to them. There's one guy that I'm always asked one question: who is my sporting hero? Well, yeah, years ago it was when I was at school, when I started playing football, reasonable level, it was Bobby Charlton, because we both could hit a ball quite hard. But then I met a guy called Michael actually is Swedish, Mikael Undrum. He's got Down syndrome. He plays golf up an 11 handicap. He is a good shot putter. He swims. He runs. I've coached him, and he's now back in Sweden, and we talk on a regular basis. I talk with his family. He's my sporting hero because he worked with me. I've got videos where he's doing his strength and conditioning, and people say to me, I actually got an email from someone who said, "You can never coach Down syndrome." Well, we did it. What I did, and I've coached a number of Down syndrome children and autistic, is you take it slowly, you break it down, and each one is different. Each one has got a different learning curve they're able to do. So I look at each one separately. But Mikhail was just very, very special. I was at Windsor, and we were training at Windsor, and the guys from Eton come in, and they were, quite astonished to see a Down syndrome lad doing athletics and doing throwing. We did some sprinting that day, and they said to me, "Well, what else he does?" And I said, "Well, actually, Mikhail, he he works for Carlo Luigi, Carlo, whatever it is, the Italian restaurant, as a vegetable chef. He works one day a week inside an old age pensioners home, and he speaks 2 languages." And they said, "What?" And I said, "Mikhail, speak to him in your normal language." And he spoke to him in Swedish. And that highlights, and they were astonished actually, but that highlights, we never know the ability of someone we are working with who has a disability. I know there's an athlete up in Edinburgh doing his PhD. You've got Steve Miller that has just today launched his new charity, which was formerly his business. He's now made it into a charity. I know so many people that when you talk to them, you just wonder what they're capable of. And that's about getting to know them and trying to help, what level of understanding do they have? I do a lot of I have a lot of Asperger's in the past, and it's getting them to know what they can, because they won't look at you and they don't always give you that recognition. So it is about working with individuals, looking at things.
Yeah. Just to pop in there, Malcolm, is I think it's easy, within the able-bodied sport, for coaches and athletes and everyone else involved with that sport to throw up casual theories, if I may call them that, based on training plans, training programs, and the training theories. But what is coming out distinctly there, from this discussion is every athlete is different, and working with a disability athlete brings that so distinctly clear. It presents that challenge to a coach that, some coaches, I included, have not encountered working with, so-called able-bodied athletes, because what we are seeing is just the physicality, but we don't know anything else that could be a disability within their own, makeup, which, you guys within the disability sport tend, from what you are saying there, eventually have to come across and, have to attend to and try and manage to bring about a performance from them. So when we say athlete-centered is the philosophy, I think it really happens more in, athletes with a disability environment.
Yeah, one of the ones that we in mainstream athletics we see a lot of, or I see a lot of, is Asperger's. Right now, I'm quite good at actually watching and learning and seeing who's got Asperger's. And within mainstream athletics, that's problems. For instance, I've coached two quite recently in the last, say, 5-6 years. Both got Asperger's. One had it very, very strongly because when he came to me, his father told me about it. But they didn't always get within the squad. For example, when I'm at Lee Valley on a Sunday morning in the winter, I might give them 5 sets of hurdle drills to do, 10 per set, and I'll say, I'm going for a cup of coffee, I'll be back in a minute, which I'm famous for my cups of coffee and teas. And when I go back, I'd say to them, how many have you done? Now, Michael Pope would go, oh, we've done 9. Or someone else would go, oh, we've done 9. But one of the young guys who had Asperger's go, no, we've only done 6. So the other athletes are going, oh, no, don't tell him the truth. And also, it makes you think, sometimes you come across situations, it makes you think about what you say, because Asperger's, one day I told them all, 12 of them, to line up against the bounding wall, and I wanted to do their sets of med ball work, and I wanted them to bounce a ball 1,000 times against the wall and walked away. 11 of the 12 turned round and shouted abuse. The one with the Asperger's, he had to do 1,000. My job then was to make sure that I got him to stop doing it without upsetting him, because he'd been given an instruction. If you tell someone with Asperger's to do something and then you change it, they get upset. And that's invariably what happens. So you learn, and I watch squads and I go, he's got Asperger's. And they go, how do you know? I said, because I can see the traits. And I see other things that you see within a mainstream athlete. And that would help if mainstream athletes understood what you've got to look at. I coach both. I coach both able-bodied and athletes with disability. It's not able-bodied; it's actually mainstream. Again, it's as long as you're not being insulted, they don't mind. I honestly tell you that. So you learn by working with each group of people, and they actually do. I had an autistic guy came to me, very badly autistic, in his 30s, from another club where he'd been asked to leave because he had a mind of a 12-year-old. And they honestly didn't know how to, because there were problems about him running with the youngsters. So I took him to St Albans. I gave him to the St Albans Striders road running team and said, look, all he wants to do is run around the track. Can you help me? And he
Mm.
did. And he still does Tuesday. Not so often now, but he did it for about 2 years, every Tuesday night. And
Mm.
the coaches there learned very quickly. Um, yeah, and you just, it all helps us expand our knowledge. It certainly helped me a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Now, listen, Malcolm. Let me just find out your view on this, and how how you manage it within a disability sport. Because I've heard you there refer to a myriad of challenges in there. So how do you cope with that? Within that, within the community, disability community, is there some interdisciplinary intervention where you're working with different practitioners that are, shall we say, experts within the different ailments or the different conditions that the athletes work with? I'm thinking here about nutrition, I'm thinking about rehab, I'm thinking about prehab, I'm thinking about strength and conditioning. How does that work in there? Is there any collaboration between
Oh,
you,
yeah,
the
yeah.
coach, and the other practitioners around you?
Yeah, when the thing I always do is, first of all, I do the strength and conditioning, but I actually go and talk to the doctors. Um, I tend not to involve the parents because the parents, on many occasions, will make out the youngster is actually more disabled than he is. And I don't know why that is, but it happens. Um, I go and talk to the doctor and say, where are my boundaries? And also, one of the things I learned very quickly, when you've got someone in a wheelchair or is an amputee, you can be very careful about strength and conditioning for the very simple reason, if you bulk them up and they're in a wheelchair, you limited their life. You actually shorten their ability to do things. They haven't got enough energy to push this big bulk around. So it's a case of weighing up what is a good weight for them, a good amount of muscle, and one that won't hinder them able to go up and down stairs, to do long rides in their wheelchair, and to work daily. They have to earn a living. So how do
Mm.
how do we balance that out? When it comes to dietary, that's I talk to the doctor, and then we may work with a nutritionist. Um, but we will sit down and talk about people in wheelchairs because their body is scrunched up all the time. They got to be careful what they eat. So you have to look at that, what sort of foods they're eating. If they're
Mm.
doing too much exercise, with someone in a wheelchair, invariably you'll see one level of energy, but then it will drop off a cliff. So you have to take that into account. There's a lots of bits and pieces. So I do rely on other people, and I talk to a lot of people with their disability because that person will tell you how they feel, what's
Mm.
worrying them, and those are sort of things you can't do it on your own. Coach wise, technicalities, I have an ability, and I don't know where it came from. But it's been written about me. There was an article written about me that I was doing something at Lee Valley with learning disability, a whole range of different disabilities, and all at the very low end.
Mm.
Sorry, the high end of their disability. So I can go from one, and I can actually talk to them individually. So go from an international learning disability F20 down to someone that has great difficulty getting movement, etc. So that
Mm.
I can handle, and it was written that he does it. I don't know how it happens, but I think it's because I work with people individually, although in a big squad, so I can move one to
Mm.
one, and I look at I see some, say, sprint coaches or endurance coaches doing drills, and there's a big gang of them. But I never understand how you can have a big gang of people and actually coach the drills, because you've got to watch everybody. When I do drills with
Yeah.
throwers, we tend to do 2, 3, 4, and that's it. I know that sprint coaches are, they're more intelligent than pros coaches, and I use the video a lot, so I go back and look at the videos and check them out. So yeah, so
Yeah.
it's about working looking at individual people, but at the same time, I've got a lot of people that support me in many ways. I've
Mm.
got a doctor that I worry about something. I can phone him up and say, "Look, doc, I've got this problem. This young guy's showing this. I've got someone who works with mental health issues with people. I can phone her up and say, look, I've got this athlete, and she said this to me, or he said this to me. I can go and talk to her and just say, yeah." It's like
Yeah.
someone may say to you, "I'm self-medicating." Right? What they're basically saying is they're under stress and they're drinking. That's a mental health issue, and we need to address that. So I need to go to some. I'm not. I don't do mental health. All you can do with mental health as a coach is listen and help them and direct them and support them to go to a medical and mental health professional. I don't
Mm.
believe in having instructions. If you're feeling mentally ill, go to our website and you'll find all the details on there. Um, the coach has got to have that. He's got to understand it as a basic. And I do a lot of courses on all different silly subjects, so that I learn more, so I can understand more. But the athletes, when they trust you, they tell you. I go to PIP meetings with some of my athletes, um, and I had to go to one because her carer wasn't there. And the woman doing the caring did the PIP said, "What would happen if you fell out the bath?" And she said, "Oh,
Mm.
well, my carer," pointing to me, "he'll lift me up and put me back in." And she turned the PIP woman said, "You look as if you could pick him up and put him in the bath, not the other way round." So we do get involved in that level sometimes, working with our athletes. And it becomes a friendship. They're all, I can't think of one that I disliked. There probably is, but I can't
Mm.
think of them.
Yeah. Well, Malcolm, it wouldn't be, enough for us to, end the show without finding out how you yourself and people and the other coaches within the, disability community are coping with the current, lockdown situation, and as well as just the pandemic situation in itself. It's difficult enough as it is, to access facilities, and it must be, even more difficult for coaches and athletes with a disability, to be able to try and make do. What is the picture like, in that within that community, and how are you coping? What would you tell other coaches on some of your own strategies and the practices that you have found working?
Right. I've got one dwarf at the moment that I coach, and that's a remote coaching situation. So I went off see her. I told my wife it was a long weekend away in Cornwall. Um, but we went down there and we've organised a circle, which is actually um, within a football ground in the corner. And we do a lot of drills together. And now her father can go with her. And while she's doing her throwing and her strength and conditioning, because of the situation, we can't be together because we can't create this bubble anymore at the moment. I will get videos and look at it, and I will give them the programs. With Dan, who's a mainstream shot putter, um, he's gone back home to Wales because there's nothing he can do. His university is closed, and he can't do anything with the university. So with him, I give him his program. We talk a lot. We video each other. We're face to face on the Facebook or whatever system we use. And then when he's doing a throw-in session, he will set the camera up, and I will watch him. And that's really all we can do. Yes, I'm lucky. I have access to St Albans. I haven't at the moment, but I did have. But within St Albans, there's a load of areas that you can do throwing on your own. There's lots of places in Watford. There's lots of places about you can go and do your running, do your sprints. We've certainly with Dan, we sorted out some weights, etc., and how we can do weights and all sorts of Heath Robertson arrangements we do on that. Down in Cornwall, I've got weights down there, and other places where I coach. But also bear in mind, I do a lot overseas anyway, so I do a lot of remote coaching in places like Ghana, Haiti, British Virgin Isles, a whole range of areas that I can look at and I can help. And also where I'm working with other coaches, I do go out and I do work with other coaches to try and help them get the confidence to go into disability sport as well as the mainstream sport. So we work together, and I will talk to them probably 2 or 3 times a week. So yeah, it's been difficult because of my work. I'm a emergency worker. I go out and I school work, electrical testing, checking out stuff, all sorts of stuff. I am allowed out, so I can actually go out and I can stand, even if it's 10 yards. As a coach, a throws coach, I tend to stay 5 to 6 meters away from the cage, so then I can see it. So I can go to somewhere where someone's throwing, and I can stand in the next field or next a few meters away, and I'm not within their space. And you just have to, be. It's a bit like disabled coaching athletes with disability. You have to adapt, and that's what we've got to do. You know, everybody's saying there's going to be Tokyo next year. Well, let's see what happens. But let's actually just make sure the athletes we got are keeping fit, that they're doing their drills, and most importantly, this time they've got someone to talk to, and they're having fun. And that's all they've got to do is have fun. And I'm a great believer that if you're doing sport and not having fun, then don't bother doing it.
Yeah.
So that's what I suggest, Dan. When you
no, cheers for that one. Yes, I think the catchphrase there is adaptation, and it's doing many rounds within this sort of discussions. Adaptation, adapt, improvise. That's what we will need, given the situation that the pandemic has brought to bear on the athletics community, and basically all people at large all over the globe. Now, in closing, Malcolm,
yes,
you're vastly experienced there. There are young coaches there, aspiring young coaches, parents that want to coach their children with disability. What 3 things would you say from your wisdom and your experience? What 3 things would you think, this would be important for you to consider, for you to bring on board as you start the journey or continue with the journey as a coach for an athlete with a disability? What 3 things would you say, this is what I'll share with you. These are nuggets. This is the gold that will help you bring gold in the journey of your athlete with a disability?
Right. The first thing is go and find a mentor. Someone who It's a proper. I do when I was full time working. I actually mentored youngsters going through university, and it's not about telling them what I think. It's getting them to use their brain and to think outside the box, and that's proper mentoring. So I would say go and find a mentor that will actually help you expand your knowledge. And I'm quite happy. I do it all the time. I work with a lot of coaches. Um, but find one, make sure and learn from that mentor what backroom staff they need. You know, you can't be the fountain of all knowledge. You need to go away and find the doctor. You need to find this, even if it's a small
Yeah.
question, but also open up your mind about looking at different situations. You know, I always say, um, when you look at um, some of the great sprinters in the past, they run differently to the ones now today. But
Mm.
should we be looking at what they're doing? We look at some of the throwers, the way they threw. Do we need to review how we coach our throwers now? So it's about opening up and listening and learning from that knowledge. One of the things I learned, and it was from Gerd Cantor, was how to stop an athlete hitting the right hand side of the fence in the cage if they are right handed, right? Or if they're left handed, the left hand side. Because that's a great thing that a lot of youngsters do, right? And that is where you focus. Most coaches will say to their athlete, look straight down the middle and look up above, around floodlight height.
Mm.
No, you don't actually, because I was over in Estonia with a few other coaches, European coaching. I spent a week out there learning how to improve um, my. And he just said, look to the left, and that was it. And I've used that ever since. And I know one youngster that came fourth in the nationals at a senior level because he looked to the left. Because every other time he was in the cage or going down the right hand side. The guy that I coached to Beijing and London from British Virgin Isles, he was going out to the right hand side, and there was a problem with some of the strength and conditioning he was given in America, which tightened up all his traps and everything else. We got that resolved, but he still had a habit of going out to the right, and that was by learning. You can learn how to actually overcome that, and he actually done all right in 60 meters. So yeah, you go out, and you know it's nice when you see young coaches coming along. Actually, I'm not reading books; they're going and talking to other coaches. They're using their eyes and they're trying to widen the scope. And we're all learning. I'm still learning today. I learn every day, so we've all got to learn as we go through life at different techniques. You know, we might like to go back to the old days, but unfortunately, we're in the modern life now. So we have to look at, you know, I use technology all the time. Much to discuss probably with my wife, who says, why are you looking at that video of that throw when, you know, there's other things. So, yeah, you just three things. Go, go and talk to people, find a mentor, someone who'll help you. And I'm always about improve your knowledge every day. That's most important. Learn from people. That young coach might come to me and he might have heard something from someone else and he's going to tell me. Don't lock your mind up and just try and do your best and don't put yourself on a pedestal. Just be yourself. Three easy things. It's about learning mainly.
I tell you what, man, you are the top man. So thank you very much on that score. Three tips: get a mentor, build your support team, and have an open
Yes.
mind. Learn. On that note, I shall say thank you very much for coming to share your experience
and I'm about it.
today on the show. So from
I'm
me
down to
and
Swindon very shortly.
from you, it is going to be good night for now. Thank you very much for watching and for being with us.
Very much, and